Let's take a look at how we can follow and unfollow users. So we have these routes here for /API/user/follow and for unfollow. Now the issue with these routes at the given moment is that they are beneath the routes with the user ID param. Meaning if we specify /API/users/anything, we're going to use this route or the methods attached to this route instead of our follow and unfollow routes with their functionality. So let's cut both the follow and unfollow routes and make sure to paste them above this route with the user ID param. Otherwise, it's certain that we will get an error. And this is just because of how the express router works. And just note that it won't interfere with these other routes, this /API/user, since we're not providing anything else here, and these other routes for /profile/whatever and for /feed, they're longer than our /API/user/user ID path. So let's take a look at how we can follow and unfollow different users. So first we'll check auth, make sure we have a current user that's authenticated. We'll run add following. So on our user model, we have this following array of object IDs so that when a user wants to follow somebody else, they'll add that user's unique ID to the following array. And obviously the user that's being followed will have the authenticated user's ID in the followers array. And just the opposite will take place for unfollowing. We'll remove the user's ID in the following array and we'll add an ID, or I should say we should remove an ID from the follower array as well. So add, remove, remove. So going to our user controller, our add following function will have a request, response, and next. So if add following runs successfully, we want to move on to add follower. So add following will get one thing from the request body, a follow ID. And this is the user that we want to add to the following array. So we'll say await user, find one and update. And we'll find a user, in fact our currently authenticated user, by their ID. So we'll set ID to request.user._ID. So we need to find the user, which may seem redundant, in order to push the follow ID onto their following array. We'll use the $push operator, and this allows us to push the ID onto the following array just like we would with a normal JavaScript array. So we'll say following will now have follow ID added onto the end, and from here we'll return next. Then add follower will just have request and response. You'll also need the follow ID, but this time we're going to still run find one and update. However, the user that we'll find will be based on the follow ID, and we'll push onto the followers array of the user that we find. We'll push onto it request.user._ID, and we'll return from this by saying res.json and pass in a user that we get back. So from this we want to get our user data, and to get the latest record, the updated values from the database, we can set new to true. So we want to get the new values, not the old values, the value of user where followers is updated with the new ID. So we'll save everything and we'll head to Postman. So we'll grab our users list again just to get the ID of the user that we want to follow. So I'm currently logged in with Jane, so I'll grab John's ID to follow him. The path for following is /API/user/follow. This will be a put request since we're updating both of the users. And for the body, we'll use raw JSON data again, follow ID set to John's ID. So once we run this, we get John's updated user data. So So followers has a new user ID in it, Jane's user ID. And if we take a look at the users list, we get the users list again. We can grab Jane's ID and use the profile endpoint to get her data. And if we look at her following array, she's following John. And the reason we see John's user data here is because we're calling populate on the ID that was added to the array. So on top of getting his ID, we get John's name and avatar. And just so you're aware, we're calling populate on the model itself. So don't think that you missed out on a step. If we go to the user model, at the very end here, we're calling this auto-populate following and followers, where it's taking the following and followers path and turning the ID into an object with the ID, name, and avatar fields, just like we got in our response data.